Hi there, everyone. Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth. Today is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2014, a global day of action and protest against the National Security Agency. And we're currently here in Olympia, Washington, to interview 3 state representatives who have just introduced a bill to block the NSA. Can you tell us a little bit about the bill that was recently introduced here and what's going on with the National Security Agency in Washington State right now?
Well, House Bill 2272 was introduced this year. It was our attempt to address what we believe is the utter failure of the federal government to take action to really stem the warrantless data collection on U.S. citizens. We've got an currently active facility right actually in 15th District on the Yakima Training Center. It's scheduled to be mothballed and moved out of state, but really the focus is on all of the data collection. It's not just that one facility. It's the Fusion Center in Seattle. It's the interaction between the NSA with the Washington State Patrol and private corporations. And we had an incident here in November where they actually collected and shared data on it's called the Million Man March. And they're collecting data on the organizers of that simply because they were going to exercise their First Amendment right. So this was our attempt to really get after what we feel to be an absolute tyrannical attack on the constitutional rights of our citizens.
It is certainly a war on the Constitution of the United States. It is certainly a war on the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And I equate what is going on. I like to use this example when people say, if you're not doing anything wrong, if you're not breaking the law, then you have nothing to worry about. Well, I pose this to that person. What if the NSA knocked on your door, entered your house, and said, we are going to take a copy of every photo on your wall, we're going to take a copy of every written document in your house, and we're also going to download everything on your computer, on your iPad, and on your phone. That very same person would be furious because they would know innately that their God-given liberties are being violated under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which was written precisely to avoid that. But because it's sort of abstract, because this metadata, these phone calls, this digital data is out there, it somehow doesn't have the same sting. They are, in fact, doing the same thing. They are warrantlessly collecting every inch of your life that they can collect, to include your Angry Birds app on your iPad and your iPhone. If we do not believe that they are collecting everything they possibly can and new information comes out every day, then we're not paying attention.
House Bill 2272 does primarily 5 things to stop the NSA's intrusion into every area of our life here in Washington State. Not only does it prevent all agencies and members of agencies and people that are contracted by agencies, but also provides some pretty stiff penalties. And one of those is a criminal penalty if these agencies actually participate with the federal government in data collection. It makes them personally accountable, which I think has to be a key piece of this entire thing. And one of the other things that it allows is it gives ordinary citizens standing to challenge the NSA on these things, but at the state level and if any of these agencies participate.
This bill simply seeks to get the federal government to obey the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. And what I like to say about the Fourth Amendment is that our elected officials need to either abide by it or amend it. They may not ignore it. And that's what this bill seeks to do. It seeks to eliminate the state's help, if you will, in the federal government's attempt to spy on Washington state citizens.
And why do you think the NSA would want to, be involved in this scale of monitoring what Americans are doing?
That's a great question. I wish we could get an answer for that. The fact of the matter is, so far they haven't responded. We watch it at the federal level. Those types of questions get asked, and there's no response. And the response that we've heard is, we're collecting it and storing it. We're not actually reviewing it. Unacceptable response. I'm sorry, but if you're going to collect the data, you better have a warrant to do it.
The Fourth Amendment really stems from what our founders lived, and that was things like general warrants from King George himself, issuing these broad writs that said that the government could search anywhere, anytime, for anything. And oh, by the way, when they found it, they'd let you know. Well, that's where we have come full circle with the NSA spying. We are going to spy on everyone, and we are going to collect everything that's collectible, and we'll let you know if we find anything. Our founders insisted on the Bill of Rights to ratify the U.S. Constitution because they understood where human beings involved in government tend to go over time if they're allowed, and that is towards tyranny.
How can they be doing this so blatantly? It seems that it's a clear violation of the Constitution. How is it possible that they can get away with this?
Well, they're known by the moniker of no such agency, and I think they just believe that if they keep flying under the radar, no pun intended, that nobody's ever going to really realize they're there. Not a lot of people are going to do anything. We're not going to get off the couch and act, and that's why it's so important to put these bills out there and continue to put these bills out there, regardless of whether they go anywhere or not, is to continue the discussion and continue to educate people that, yeah, the federal government is doing these things, number one. And number two, they're doing it in blatant violation of the Constitution, of the plain words of the Constitution, not only of the United States, but also of Washington State.
How significant are the revelations of Edward Snowden when he released the fact that PRISM is spying on everyone? Was that the key moment to spark this debate?
Well, many of us that have studied history know that the Echelon Network has been around since 1947. In fact, in Washington State, in Yakima, in Representative Taylor's own district, there's an NSA listening facility. So we've known it's been around there. But actually having an insider expose it gives credibility to all of those folks that have been fighting and trying to educate for years. And I think that was the key turning point. When you have an insider saying, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, and they claim, well, it's for national security, it's to stop the terrorists, there is no excuse to violate the Constitution of the United States or the state of Washington. Both of those documents were written in crisis and for crisis. And we have to remember that. They were written to take the emotion out of the situation and to protect people's rights despite the emotion.
Claiming terrorism does not give them the right to ignore the Constitution of the United States, period. End of story. We've all taken oaths as public officials to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and the fact is they are acting contrary to that right now with this data collection. They can claim terrorism all they want, but the fact of the matter is U.S. citizens are afforded their constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, and that guarantees a warrant be issued. They're acting contrary to law.
And what's the aim if this bill is successful? What would you guys like to see come out of this?
Well, this bill really focuses on the interaction between state agencies and federal agencies like the NSA. It would prohibit the data collection. It would prohibit support in the form of money, grants, services. It would create a cause of action that citizens can go back if their rights have been violated. Ultimately, if this isn't the vehicle that's chosen to move the issue forward, I'm fine with that. If it gets the dialogue started, perfect. That's what the intention here is. The more people talking about the issue, the better chance we have at passing a meaningful law that protects our citizens' rights.
We have arrived here because government, and government is not an entity in and of itself, it is comprised of the elected officials that we as voters send to the halls of government, have allowed this to happen. I like to reiterate that to folks as best I can. The NSA only gets away with what your elected officials allow them to get away with. And if your elected officials are not openly and vociferously, especially at the state and federal levels, resisting this unconstitutional behavior of data collection on every single American and foreign governments, then they are simply not doing their job. They need to be replaced.
I think people need to be educated that if we don't do something, later on we're not going to have the ability to act or speak against it if this continues the way it's going. When they're literally tracking every email, every credit card purchase, every action we're taking, everything we talk about on the telephone, we're in a very scary place. It really is Orwellian, and there is no other way to describe it. And so my hope from the NSA bill and from blocking the NSA and stopping what they're doing is not only to educate people, but actually take what we believe and put it into action and get folks out there from both sides of the aisle, as we say here in Washington, because freedom and liberty are bipartisan issues. They cross party lines. And so to get people to actually come together instead of being divided and move forward and check the federal government, I think is the biggest thing we could see done out of this entire movement and the NSA bill being introduced.
You think this will be looked back at as a time in history when people really took on the government and started exposing the fact that Big Brother is spying on everything? Are we at that fork in the road right now?
I think we are at that fork in the road, and what I hope is that we can look back in history and say, they tried, but we held their feet to the fire. We held their feet to the rule of law. We forced our governments to adhere to the Constitution that binds them. And that brings me to another point. The Constitution of the United States is a delegated powers document. And what that means simply is that the federal government cannot do anything that is not specifically delegated to them in the United States Constitution. The 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution give all other powers to the people or the states respectively. So not only are they acting outside of their scope, their undelegated powers, but House Bill 2272 really nails it, and that it says this: if the federal government won't stop their unconstitutional behavior, then states under the 10th Amendment will step in, and they will be the voice of the people, and they will rein this stuff in by refusing to assist the federal government, and in this case the NSA, in any way.
Now that awareness is beginning to raise about this issue, we're seeing global events such as the protest today. What do you know about what's going on around the world today on February the 11th?
Well, it's a global day of protest against the NSA, whether you're in Canada or the United States. It's unfortunate the United States has taken this route and is literally violating not only the rights of our citizens, but the citizens of other countries, our friends and allies. I mean, we're spying on our friends and allies. How does that engender trust or engender alliances? And so this day is to protest that, and I applaud everybody that's participating around the world.
The more people talking about this, the better chance that we have, and I believe there's 7 other states right now that have introduced similar legislation to House Bill 2272. The more people talking about it, the better chance we have at states passing laws to put their federal government back in check, as the Constitution is designed to do.
The only thing standing in the way of the globalists and their agenda and their success is us. Those that believe in freedom and liberty. Those that want to not only believe in it, not only be educated, not only educate our neighbors and friends and family, but will act on it. That's what's standing in the way. And so programs like what you're doing and what everybody else is doing in the United States and the alternative media is really that huge wall that is keeping them from succeeding, and that's why we have to continue doing what we're doing.
Secretly spying on your own citizens is the very essence of tyranny. We cannot stand for this as elected officials. We cannot stand for it as American citizens. We need to put an end to this, and we do that by demanding that our federal representatives stop this behavior, and that our state representatives, if our federals won't, stand up to them and say enough is enough.